Beyond 3D.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's edition of Beyond 3D here on RPP 98.7 and 98.3, streaming at you live over the internet as well. Hopefully everyone's doing quite well out there. I'm sitting here in the studio with my co-host Clint. How are you this week?
Hello, Matt.
You're doing well, then.
I'm great. Next to the birth of my three daughters, today is my fourth favourite day of the year.
Wow. That's pretty good. Why?
Today is Batman Day.
Batman Day?
Today is Batman Day.
What, was Batman created by somebody?
Bob Kane.
Bob Kane way back when?
And Bill Finger.
Bill Finger? Don't know. You'd have to explain.
No, today's officially Batman Day. So
okay. Officially Batman Day, and you are a Batman fan. So that is why it's the fourth happiest day of
happiest day.
That's excellent. Not a fan of Batman that much. I am. I have to take that back. I am a fan of the TV series.
Yeah, but
I loved Adam West.
No, I can't do it.
You can't? No?
No, I can't do it.
Oh, come on.
Look, I grew up with it.
Yeah.
I watched it. But it's so camp. I can't do camp.
Okay, what about the ultimate episode from that show?
No, hang on a minute. Let me just explain something.
Yes, go for it.
It was never meant to be that campy.
Oh, I can believe it.
It came out that way back in the 60s.
Yeah.
Because it was the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Fair enough. But what about the ultimate episode that they did?
Here we go.
You know what it is.
No, I don't.
You must know what it is.
No, I don't.
Bruce Lee.
Oh, he did. He played Kato, didn't he?
The episode where Batman and Robin met the Green Hornet and Kato.
And Kato with Bruce Lee.
And the ultimate insult was they had a Mexican standoff. Mm-hmm. And Batman is standing there and the Green Hornet is standing there and they don't know how to fight each other. They had this like a standoff. And then you get Robin and Bruce Lee in a standoff. And everybody was like, oh, that was campy. Oh, come on. You cannot possibly be serious.
I can't do it because it's way too campy.
Bruce Lee could have cleared the room. But in this episode, he was standing. Oh, amazing. But it was a fun series to watch. But we digress a little bit. But it's enjoyable to digress when it comes to stuff like Batman and those kind of TV series.
How was your Saturday? It's been a great day.
It was a very nice day. Sunny and everything like that this morning, but what are you going to do? We are in spring now, so hopefully it will continue to get better and better and better around here.
We missed something back in August, on the 24th of August, that happened in the world, something really prominent. Mm-hmm. The earthquake in Italy.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, 6.0 magnitude earthquake, 297 dead.
Oh, wow. That's right. It did go up then.
It did. Now, you know what happened coincidentally on that exact same date? Many years ago?
Go ahead.
On the 24th of August, 79 AD, was the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in Pompeii.
Wow.
1,150 bodies have since been excavated.
Wow.
So coincidentally enough, Pompeii exploded on the same date as that 6.0 magnitude earthquake.
Amazing.
The Earth's talking.
Absolutely.
Who's listening?
Obviously not the people in that village. They had no clue, God bless them. But what are you going to do? That is the Earth, and that is what it does. That's it. In a sense, I tend to think of it sometimes as retribution for something going on someplace else. It always balances itself out. In the news, just looking at a few things, the United States has just grounded its F-35 fleet.
Okay.
So we'll have to find out what's going on with that as far as planes are concerned. The great one, Donald Trump.
No, I'm not going to let you sit here and say that.
I'm being sarcastic.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Yes, the great one, Donald Trump, just conceded that Barack Obama was in fact born in the United States after his $5 million birther movement ploy that he pulled, trying to say that he was not a natural-born American citizen, so should be removed from the presidency.
Barry Soetoro, who was allegedly not born in the United States.
Yes, he was allegedly not born in the United States, but in fact he was.
I've got somewhere, and I need to dig it up, archival audio of somebody who went to school with him when he was Barry Soetoro in Papua New Guinea, which is where he allegedly went to school for a little while.
Well, look, he was in and around Indonesia, that entire area, ultimately in Hawaii as well. So he was in the Pacific. So, but the thing was, he was born in Hawaii. The thing is that...
was he, Matt?
He was.
Was he, Matt?
He was. I'll get to why. There are documentaries out there done by certain people that will explain to you the fact that who he says his father is, the Kenyan, is not his actual father, and his actual father is
Frank Marshall.
And therefore, everything would fall into place. Frank Marshall was a communist, a videographer, shall we say, a purveyor of porn.
Yeah, let's not sugarcoat it. Let's not sugarcoat it.
And being that his mother and her father and family were all that three-letter agency known as CIA, infiltrating the communists who were trying to infiltrate the United States. One thing leads to another. You have a kid born in Hawaii, and they can't say that he is of basically a communist sympathizer, so therefore change the name, get a different person, and blah, 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 blah.
I never actually thought of it that way, as in him being the progeny of Frank Marshall in the United States continent somewhere. Yeah.
So if your mother is from, well, his father was from Chicago, mother is from Kansas, moved around with the CIA, but settled in Hawaii, and that's where he was born. So that's not a problem. So as far as Trump's argument is concerned, and he is now trying to pawn it off on the fact that Hillary Clinton brought it up in 2008 first. But Hillary Clinton didn't spend $5 million on it to pursue it, so therefore...
That's the bit that I don't understand. I mean, if it was legitimate, if he legitimately was born in America, then just smack that birth certificate down and go, there it was. But I remember at the time when he was asked to produce his birth certificate, there were so many discrepancies on the one that was presented at the time that it threw up so many flags.
The thing about United States birth certificates, and we'll have to get into this another time when we talk about the QSIP numbers on there, and they actually, when you were born, sell $1 million worth of bonds on the New York Stock Exchange, but that's another story.
Hang on, is this the Strawman?
The Strawman argument, yes.
Can you just explain to our listeners tonight? Just go into it real quick. We've got time.
Okay, the whole thing around a Strawman, when you were born, it is a certificate that is issued, a certificate of birth.
Where?
In the United States.
Yep.
Now, what they then do is they send that certificate to be registered in another place on Earth. Guess where? One of your favorite places. Not CERN, but not that far
That's
away.
That's not my favorite place by a long shot. That place is just
the Vatican.
Charts. The Vatican.
The Vatican, actually, yes. Now, when this happens, what they are allowed to do is each certificate has a identification number on it. That identification number goes to Wall Street, literally. I think it was 111 Wall Street, and it is registered there. And they are now allowed to, based upon the United States bankruptcy filings back in 1933, I believe it was, they are now allowed to use that number and create what is called a straw man. Being that during the bankruptcy in the United States, good old FDR decided to pay off the debt that the United States owed by pledging the sweat on the furry brows of United States citizens.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
What they do is they take that identification number, add some digits to it, and every time the government goes to have a bond auction of 30-year notes, 30-year treasury bills and bonds and things like that, they actually take your number and they assign $1 million to it, and they put that, and they sell $1 million worth of treasury bonds
against
in the open market against your identity. Your identity, correct.
So go on.
That is the initial process. What they then do is they need the citizenry to work, pay taxes, so that they can use the tax money to pay off the debt of those bonds that they've come up with.
Now, if you can register yourself as a strawman identification, like as an alternative ID, what's the benefits of that?
there is an account for everybody that's alive, and that account has a value to it.
Yeah.
What some people are now trying to do is to cash in on that trust, so to speak, and remove the money that is in their name under a straw man and be able to use that for their own benefit.
Yes, but we were talking earlier tonight about the legal benefits of being a straw man.
The legal benefits come when it comes to dealing with things like the judiciaries, the courts, and what actually happens in a court when you go in front of a court because you supposedly break or allegedly break a law. What they are trying to do is they are trying to get basically to interject themselves into your straw man account to be able to remove some of that money. The way they remove that money, it's called a fine. So if you speed, they can fine you.
But if you're smart enough to know how to use the straw man identity, what can you do in a court of law?
You can go into a court of law knowing that you are a sovereign individual, and anytime they try to, what they try to do when you go into a court of law, they say, what is your name and where do you reside? What they are trying to do is identify that you are identifying as that straw man account. Once they have that, they can use the courts, which is a trust system, to fine you and remove some of that money from the account. But what they're actually trying to do is take over your account as beneficiary, so therefore they are entitled to all of the monies that account has accumulated over your lifetime.
And if you're smart enough and you know your straw man identity and you go to court and you represent yourself,
yes, as a sovereign individual.
As a sovereign individual, give me a scenario how that can work in your benefit.
You can't be fined for parking tickets. You can't be fined for speeding tickets, because the fact of the matter is you as a sovereign individual have a right to travel. You therefore don't need a driver license if you want to get technical. It's a situation where if you think about what a driver license is, that what they are saying is it is a privilege. It is not a right. You have a right to travel, but you do not have a right to drive on the roads. But the roads you don't have a right to drive on without a license are public roads. Public roads are used for commerce. Therefore, commerce is where the governments can charge tax. You're not income tax in the United States. I don't know about Australia, but the income tax in the United States started in 1913 when they started the Federal Reserve. So you have a situation where there was no income tax before that. There were no passports before that. None of that stuff existed. You now have a situation where what they have done is, because of this so-called straw man, because of the fact that they have, in a sense, usurped your identity, even though you were a live birthed person, you weren't stillborn, you were alive. What they have done is they are using that identity to their own benefit, not your benefit.
1942, 1942, I think, was when income tax came into Australia.
Yeah. So when you look at the situations around taxation was supposed to be on business, on commerce. It wasn't on personal income. That has changed over the years. There are a lot of fights in the United States, and believe me, you don't want to take a lot of it on because they have guns, but there are a lot of people who still say to this date that the income tax was not ratified. Now, personally, I don't believe most people out there have a problem with paying some money in tax to support infrastructure that they use, and government has to basically allocate funds and monies to different projects. That's not a problem. The problem is the amount of money that they charge as far as taxes are concerned. I think that's where people's real problem comes into it. What's going to happen now in the States is, and if you look at the political situation there right now, the Republican side is now trying to say that they're going to lower the corporate tax. And they're going to lower the corporate tax somewhere between 15 and 20% because that will match China. They're also talking about having only 3 tax brackets as far as income tax is concerned.
Dog poor.
Yeah.
Poor. and
just about coming
average.
Back to middle class if you're lucky. So yeah, what you're going to get is that's what they're running on. Now that always goes well with people because if they have more money in their paychecks every week or every other week, that's more money that they can put into the economy and spend in their neighborhoods. So that's a good thing. So hopefully that kind of a thing will work. But usually what happens is you have one person coming in and saying this. Now the last people who did this in the States, and see what happened to them, the last 2 before this, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, assassinated. Ronald Reagan.
Attempted assassination.
Attempted assassination.
Yep.
So every time you get a person that steps in there and tries to cut taxes, which goes to pay off these bonds that they issued when you were born. The powers that be don't like that very much.
Okay.
Interesting scenarios that can come up, but
Strawman, look into it, people.
look into it. There's a lot of people, and maybe we should look into it a little bit more of it ourselves and get some people down here in Australia and Victoria, where we are, to be able to talk to us about it, that have really done a lot of research into that. That might be interesting for the guys out there. So maybe we'll look into that.
Leave it with me.
In a couple of coming weeks, we can probably find somebody that can work that out for us.
Park it with me, and I'll check it out this week. Beyond 3. D.
Welcome back to this week's edition.
Hang on, I was going to keep talking with minutes.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
This week, I looked at a really, really interesting talk. Oh, I just broke my pen. Sorry. This week I looked at a really, really interesting talk in regards to a gentleman who learnt to do a meditation where he was able to look at his 4 different parallel lives that were occurring in different parallel universes. And he was able to then decide which was the better outcome out of the 4 and then move into it.
And then move into it. Why would you have to move into it if you're basically living 4 parallel lives?
Well,
move his consciousness into that so he can concentrate on that specific...
On that one in particular.
Okay.
And he was doing this really, really interesting talk about his theory on schizophrenics. And he was saying that schizophrenia is not necessarily a disease. It's people who are in tune with one of their parallel lives, and what they're getting is that frequency into their consciousness.
Those voices they are hearing are coming
into their consciousness.
Okay.
It's a parallel life that they're allegedly living somewhere else, and the 2 frequencies are crossing over. So that's where they get the voices.
That's very interesting. Clint, I'll ask you this. When you read this and got into this, did the person say, out of the 4 lives, which one?
Yeah. Yes, he did.
Interesting.
Do you want me to elaborate on that just a little bit more?
A teeny bit would be interesting.
Look, he runs meditation workshops.
Yep.
Very trained, very well-known psychologist out of the States. People come to him with their lives and they say, my life's really, really bad and nothing's working out for me. So he does these sessions where he puts them under a deep meditative state and they get to view. He helps them. He takes them into this trance state where he works with them and they'll pick 4 parallel lives. And the person that's having the session gets to look at those 4 lives individually, what baggage those 4 lives come with, what outcomes those 4 lives branching off to, and then the person gets to decide, I like option 3, and then he helps them on a conscious level move their consciousness over across into that parallel life. I don't know the nuts and bolts of it. I'm going to get the book. It is available on Amazon.
Okay.
Give me 1 second. I'll see if I can look it up while we're chatting.
The thing that I first think of when you say that is, if the life chosen is not the life, let's say, in this dimension, where we are now, for lack of a better term, what happens to the body in that?
I was listening and I'm thinking to myself, okay, so your consciousness moves across into choice number 3.
Yep.
Okay. What happens? He didn't end up. You have to buy
That's
the book.
What I would. You have to buy the and see that, because the thing that would strike me as being odd is, all right, you have 4 different lives, parallel lives. So it's as if you have a company, and the company has a CEO or a chairman, and then the chairman branches out and says, we're going to have affiliates in 5 different cities. And this person's here, this person's here, this person's here, this person's here. They all report back to the chairman what's going on from these different 5 cities to the hub, to the chairman. What then happens is the chairman's then going to decide, well, you're really doing good, so I'm going to swap with you. What happens to the person that's there? What happens to the chairman? If it's running parallel, all of those each one of those 4 lives has consciousness. How do you decide, okay, I don't want to be in this Earth plane anymore. I'm going to go to that one over there. What happens to the person here? Who has to swap with you?
I asked one of my friends this question. I'm going to ask you this question too.
Yep.
I asked one of my friends this question the other week.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, last week, just gone. If you were able to move into a parallel universe
Yes.
and nobody knew you were there, say you're like I don't know, you don't belong there.
Right.
Let's just say you don't belong there, but you're there.
Yep.
And you were able to look yourself up.
Yep.
And so let's call you Matt A.
Mm-hmm.
You go to parallel universe and you hunt down Matt B.
Right.
Matt B is living the most amazing life ever.
Yep.
Totally 100%. Everything's going fantastic for you.
Mm-hmm.
You're rich, you're wealthy, your family's very successful and happy.
Mm-hmm.
Would you kill yourself and replace yourself if there was no
Ramifications?
no ripple in the time stream continuum?
No. I wouldn't.
There's no karma.
No karma? Still wouldn't.
You still wouldn't replace yourself?
No.
Okay.
No.
See, that's the caliber of friends that I have, because they all said yes very quickly.
Really? No, because to me, what it represents, as far as I'm concerned at least, it represents different paths on an evolutionary scale.
Mm-hmm.
I consider all of those parallel lives to still have one monad, one divine spark that has created all of those lives. Therefore, it is not for me to say, oh, that guy's doing better over there, I'm going to kill him and replace him. You don't do that, because all that does, in my opinion, is quell your spiritual evolution. There are lessons to be learned here. If you find out through meditation that at the same time you were here, you also live on 5 other worlds, and you have 5 other lives, and those lives are going along as well, what that is more information you're gathering, all at the same time. You all have to report back. Could there be a situation where somebody would say, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm going to quit, or I'm going to go over to that one? Yeah, but that information still has to be gathered. So in a sense, what you're doing is letting down the team, in my opinion.
Okay. Well, this gentleman that the talk I was looking at was Bruce Goldberg.
Okay.
And he specializes in talks on time travel, teleportation, and parallel universes.
Yep.
So it was really interesting. If anybody wants to check out Dr. Bruce Goldberg's literature, jump on Amazon.
Absolutely.
Here's another question.
Okay.
Just before we go for a break. Have a think about it.
Yep.
You're invited to travel the universe physically.
Physically.
Not spiritually.
Right.
Physically.
Right.
And because allegedly where we are is out in the boonies.
Yep.
So you can go right to the core of the universe in a ship. Here's the clincher. You're not allowed to come back ever. You leave your family behind and you go. Would you go? Because one of my friends looked at me, and he has a daughter, and I'll say, hello, Greg, how are you? He looked at me and he said no, and then he stopped and thought about it, and then he looked at me again and he goes, you'll have to tell my daughter why I left.
The first thought I have is I'd want to bring him with me.
Yeah, of course you would.
But if you have to make a choice, and the choice is...
You can go to the far ends of the universe. You can see every life form, visit all the different cultures and societies all throughout the galaxy.
Right.
But you'll never get to come back to Earth ever again.
Right.
Would you go?
Nah.
Okay.
No. And there's a reason. And the reason is, for me, at least, I've gotten to see certain things that let you know in no uncertain terms that what we can see with the physical eyes of the physical universe is the size of an angstrom unit. It is nothing. And when you expand your consciousness to the point where you can see so much more, going to the internal workings of the physical universe to see other planets, other people, other cities, it's all just along the evolutionary spectrum. They can be a heck of a lot farther along than we are here, but when you go beyond all of that and then come back to something like that, you're like, yeah, well, I'll be honest with you, it would be fascinating to see. I would love being able to see something like that, but if you say you can't come back, that's where I have a problem.
It'd be kind of like going and spending a month on a beach in Thailand, and then the next day going straight back to work and sitting in an office cubicle. Once you came back, after having that experience, the mundane would no longer be... You wouldn't be able to digest this reality anymore. You wouldn't be able to cope. I don't think. That's my opinion anyway.
I can probably agree with that. And I think what it really comes down to is if you have people in this plane of existence that you love and have compassion for and want to spend time with, to the point where if any experience like that you had, you'd want to share it with them, you don't want to leave them behind. No. In any way.
One is the loneliest number. Beyond 3. D.
Welcome back to this week's edition of Beyond 3D. Matt and Clint here. Clint, this is a funny story in a sense, but in a sense it's not. It's really interesting. The Paralympics in Rio.
Okay. Where's this going?
Just a second. A certain person...
I know who you're not talking about.
Won a gold medal in the 400-meter final for Great Britain.
Okay.
His name is Paul Blake. He has a famous father, and Star Wars fans would know who his father is. Not big stars, but they would know who his father is, and I will say his father's name in the movie.
Hang on a sec. Give me a minute. I need to try and work this out. I think I've worked it out.
Go ahead.
You know what? I'm just going to play the audio for it.
That's a good idea.
Hang on, let me see if I can find it. YouTube. Hang on, let me just YouTube it. Okay, I found it.
Did you?
I found it.
Okay.
And all I'm going to say is it's not Harrison Ford.
No, very good.
Yes, Greedo. As a matter of fact, I was just going to see your boss. Tell Jabba that I've got his money.
So Greedo.
There you go.
Greedo.
I thought that was interesting. So, you get your coordination down as best you can. You win a gold medal at the Paralympics in Rio, and the story comes out as Paralympics Day 9. Star Wars actor's son wins first gold.
What was the event again?
The 400 meters.
Lucky it wasn't shot put. Do you know why?
Go ahead.
Because Greedo shot first.
Oh, amazing. Now, this week in scanning and researching, I came across a very interesting video. This video, and I wrote Chris from Mars Anomalies about it. He put up a video where he does, because we were talking about going into the universe and seeing all the different worlds and cities and things out there. He put up a video of Jupiter's moon Ganymede.
Was that from the perspective of one of the poles?
It wasn't from the perspective of one of the poles. This was just a normal survey from one of the ships that they sent up and out there.
Okay.
And I decided, well, it was a half an hour long. I decided, look, I'm going to watch this thing and see what's going on. And Mars Anomalies, which is the YouTube channel, puts up some really nice videos. Chris does a really good job there insofar as... And I wanted to ask you, there's a term for when, you're looking up at the clouds in the sky and all of a sudden you start seeing birds and dragons and all that kind of stuff. There's a term for that. And this term is used a lot when people that do surveys on Mars and in rock formations, they start seeing different things that look like statues and look like buildings and all that kind of stuff.
Cloud gazing?
Well, that may be, but there's a technical term that I've heard used. I'll have to look it up.
Aeromancy.
Could be, I'm not sure.
No, that's it.
Okay, fair enough.
It's aeromancy.
Fair enough.
Scientific study of cloud formations.
Well...
Do you like how I pulled that out of the ether?
Interesting, yeah.
I got the little wheel on my mouse.
There you go.
On my laptop. It's still spinning from YouTube and Greedo. So.
The thing about this was you looked at Ganymede and it's streaked, as in there's a lot of water content that could possibly be there. And he did the enhancements, and that's why I wanted you to watch this because you're really good at the CGI and things along those lines. But what I noticed with this video was, as he described what he was seeing, and you kept looking at it, and there is the power of suggestion, but at the same time, looking at this video and looking at the way things were arranged on the planet, including the fact that for some strange reason these guys always find these hexagonal patterns in the different areas around the place, which are more than likely, being that there are no straight lines in nature and things like that. It's very interesting.
Prometheus reminded everybody about that.
This place literally looked like, as he enhanced it, a major cities with tunnel systems, all kinds of stuff going on. This is what it looked like, and if you ever go up, like if you zoom in on Google Earth now, if you pick a point of a building somewhere in Tokyo, this Google Earth will come in, you'll see the entire scene, and it'll just bring down, and the little cursor will be there right on the building that you would basically put the address in for. This looked like that, but it wasn't able to zoom all the way in to see everything like that. Fascinating video, guys. You should look at that on YouTube if you have a quick half hour, and just to see what this person found in the topography of Ganymede, one of Jupiter's moons. Now, Jupiter...
I usually use Google Maps for more nefarious reasons.
Yeah, I can believe it. Google is good for certain things, but when it comes to this kind of stuff, who knows? Have you looked at, what is it, the moon and Mars through Google Earth and all that kind of stuff?
I didn't know you could.
Yeah, you can do a lot of stuff with it these days.
I'm too busy to tool around with stuff
okay,
like that.
No tooling, just a half an hour a day, no more.
Half an hour a day?
But looking at this, especially with the Ganymede situation, there are how many moons around Jupiter? 60-something? They don't even have names for all of them.
I think I listed half a dozen.
Yeah, but they don't even have
2
names
months
for at least half of the moons up there at this point in time. But based on what they have found on the moon, based on what has been found on the Venus, Mars, I've seen a few pictures lately from Mars that, I'm very sorry, it's a building that fell over, or some kind of thing that was carved, statuary or something like that, temples or something. Then they break it up, and there are scientists that basically say there was some kind of a nuclear holocaust that happened based upon the scarring on the surface of Mars. When you look at these things, you have Mercury, they found things, Venus, they found things. We're obviously here on Earth. You have things on the moon. You have things on Mars. You then go through the asteroid belt and Ceres and all these things they're finding, well, the different formations that they found. You then head out to Jupiter, and on the moons of Jupiter, you are seeing some unbelievable topography on some of these planets out there. Saturn, in the rings, it looks like they have found certain structures out there. Neptune, the other blue planet in our solar system, they're basically saying spiritually and esoterically that there is life on that planet as well. And then depending on, I didn't mention Uranus at all because I don't know that much about that one, but then if you head out toward the old planet, which I still think of as a planet, Pluto, they found other structures and things like that. I would say that at one time or another there has been life, human-type life, or at least humanoid, throughout this solar system.
Forget about the state that these particular planets are in at the moment.
Yeah.
Forget about that. Focus on the fact that we exist on a billionth the size of a pinhead compared to what's out there. Now, what's out there might be quite highly suitable for life on Venus, for life on Pluto, for life on pick a planet.
I agree.
You can't use the mentality of an Earth-based carbon life form trying to etch out an existence on a planet like Saturn, because it's not conducive. It's the wrong kind of environment, obviously.
And then if you even then you put the equation known as time into the mix, and there might have been a time where human life as we know it now did exist on Mars.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the planet would have had to be in a different state than what it is currently, that we currently see. So when you look at it that way, a lot of the things I think that they're seeing on these planets are millions, if not tens of millions of years old.
Richard Hogland is just about devoted his entire life to uncovering and revealing structures on the moon.
There have been some new ones found recently. They have found new domes.
There was a glass one, wasn't there, recently?
Yeah.
What planet was that?
No, they found a glass dome on the moon recently. I think Secure Team put up a video on it about maybe 3 or 4 days ago. So that's this past week. A lot of these things are being searched for. I mean, if you think about it, if you were... Well, let's think about... Oh, guys, think about the house you're in right now. And then think about if you were traveling above Australia right at the edge of space. And you had to look down and find your house. It's not that easy. It takes a lot of time to be able to scan the whole thing. They're still looking for 370, even though they said new parts of it have washed up on Tanzania, which I'll find interesting later.
You ever tried to find your house on a plane as you fly into Melbourne?
Not easy to do.
Very hard to do.
So when you think about even that, and that could be at 10,000 feet, you're talking about satellites that are in elliptical orbits around certain bodies in space, and they're taking maps or doing a map of the area. You then have to be able to zoom into that area. It depends on the budgetary concerns of the person who put the satellite up there, what kind of cameras they've put on the daggone thing. Depending on that, the pixelation rates and everything like that. Now, we have all heard that there are satellites in space that from space and from their orbit can tell whether or not a coin in a parking lot is heads or tails.
Shut up.
Fact. So, if that is the case, why do I always find that when we want to see certain things on the moon or something like that, and they have satellites in and around the moon, that they always have these blurry pictures? I personally believe that they don't always have blurry pictures, but they just do not let the clear ones out because all of a sudden, everything that they have told us over the last 100 years about what's actually out there will be revealed. It will be truly revealed. There's no more hiding it. And guys, I've said this before. If you have a telescope, point it at the moon, zoom in as much as you can, and wait an hour.
Not your neighbours.
No, not your neighbours.
Not your neighbours, straight up.
Up, look at the moon, get a Barlow lens in there. That means you see everything left to right and not upside down. And stare at it if you can for an hour. Or get one of the computer programs that can lock in on it and you can just look at a screen for an hour. You will see all kinds of fun things going across your screen.
And if you can get some kind of infrared attachment for your telescope, you will flip your sugar honey ice and tea.
Unbelievable what you start to see, and we're not just talking about birds and planes. There's a whole lot of stuff up there. I saw a video the other day where this thing entered the atmosphere, and I don't know what it was, but it comes in, and it's coming from the right side of the screen to the left side of the screen. Then the thing does a 180-degree turn and heads out the other way.
I saw that.
What the heck was that?
I saw that.
You can't, there's all kinds of stuff you can see up there.
It's no coincidence that the Vatican have a telescope called Lucifer that views the universe in infrared. And that's all they do. That's all they do.
If that, and then the next one they have, what's the big one they just built in China, which is it's a radio telescope.
Oh, speaking of China.
Yes.
They've just launched their first quantum satellite.
Okay.
China launched its first quantum satellite in a hack-proof communications bid. So this alleged satellite is unhackable.
Wow. I'm looking it up myself.
I know you are. You're tapping the keyboard. I'm watching.
China's latest leap forward isn't just great. Yes. It's quantum.
It's a 2-year experiment anyway.
The world's first quantum communications satellite has gone into orbit.
A 2-year experiment to see whether encrypted information can be sent over long distances using quantum physics.
Fantastic what some of these guys come up with. At least it's in orbit now, so we didn't have to worry about SpaceX going boom on the launch pad.
It's no SpaceX.
Where are they sending it? What is it going to do? Basically, so it's going to go into orbit around the Earth, and they're going to basically start sending and retrieving data and see exactly what happens.
When I say China's putting a quantum satellite up for encryption, that's the mainstream narrative that's being fed. That might not necessarily be exactly what it's doing.
According to this article, it's saying that the quantum program is the latest part of a multi-billion-dollar strategy over 2 decades to draw even with or surpass the West in hard sciences research.
I just thought of that. I just wanted to bring it up.
Interesting.
There you go.
Very interesting indeed.
Beyond 3. Welcome back, everyone, this week to another episode, Matt, of Beyond 3D.
Yes, indeed.
Giants.
Nephilim.
Yeah.
All those guys.
All those guys. Now, You brought that up last week,
I did.
and I got a little bit excited about it because I've seen quite a few vids and documentaries on this exact topic.
It's interesting. When you start to study this, and Clint, I know you'll know this goes back a long way.
Biblical.
And that's way back. I was just going back about 100 to 150 years.
No, it goes back as far as biblical.
Well, insofar as what's going on, because there's a couple of things going on, and I'm not trying to digress here, but the Smithsonian Institution, which is from around circa 1845, 1846.
The keepers of all good secrets.
The keepers of all good secrets, as it says. What do they say? For the increase and diffusion of knowledge. So that's the Smithsonian. There were a lot of newspaper articles in the United States back around the turn of the century. So the noughts, as you would say, and the teens, or the tens, the noughts and the tens. And it was around things going on in Ohio and Wisconsin. So the Middle West area of the United States, and all of these mounds. And as they excavated these mounds, they would be finding a whole lot of different skeletal remains.
Large skeletal remains.
Quite large.
Very large. And we're not talking like giganticism or anything like that. We're talking like 15-foot, 20-foot skeletons.
Yeah. And a lot of these things were dug up, and the Smithsonian was brought in, and they said, well, fine, we'll take care of it. And they did. As in, you never saw anything of it again. So it was fascinating. All the different skeletons found in Wisconsin in 1912, et cetera, that just disappeared.
Now, there are tales and there are stories with Native Americans.
Yes.
Do you remember being kids and we grew up watching like Bugs Bunny cartoons?
Always.
And he'd come across maybe a Native American.
Yep.
And he'd hold up his hand and say,
"Ow."
"How?" Do you know why they allegedly used to do that? Because these Nephilim, or these giants that we're talking about, used to have 6 digits on their hands and feet. So from a distance, what the Native Americans used to do when they would approach somebody from a distance who looked rather large, they'd hold up their hands and say, "How?" And the response was supposed to be from the other person to hold up their hands and say, "How?" back. And that gave them a chance to see how many fingers and toes they had. That gave them a chance to see how many fingers
they had. Okay. Interesting. Oh, good old Bugs Bunny.
Now, I say that in regards to quite some time ago, a gentleman was navigating his way down the Grand Canyon in a raft and doing a survey, a government survey.
Yeah.
He came across a rather large cave halfway up a cliff face in an area of the Grand Canyon that is totally off limits. But he was allowed to be there because he was doing a government survey.
Yeah.
So he found this cave entrance halfway up the side of a cliff wall and managed to, get some ropes and make his way up there and have a look. And it was an alleged cavern of a giant. And to this day, this undisclosed location now has armed guards, armed army personnel guards that guard the entrance of that cave 24/7.
Boy, would I like to see what's in there.
Oh, who wouldn't? Who wouldn't?
Quite frankly. Ooh, drones. Couldn't we get a drone and try to secretly fly it up there and let them shoot it down? And if they shoot it down, you know something's going on?
Well, who's this weird business?
Not me. I'll do it.
I know you'd do it.
I'm just fascinated by stuff like that, and the fact that they would post armed guards out inside of the daggone thing just to keep anyone from getting in, I find interesting. Intriguing.
Well, let's go back to pre this event.
Okay.
There is no antiquity that records giants that were not cannibals that I have found. So the point being is that, will you take us to what Dr. Mose said?
Yeah.
Because I think it's important.
Absolutely, because the history of what happened here in the United States of America, central to the Apache, the Hopi, the Navajo, all the way up to the ancient Anasazi, the story is that these guys came and they were absolutely cannibalistic. And you look at what is the history, what is the story that is told there from the Apaches. They say that a large giants come up through these doorways of the earth. They start sweeping across the Arizona Badlands. This is all part of the Apache creation story that you can even go to Wikipedia and read about it. They start sweeping across the Arizona Badlands. They're cannibalizing the Indians. They refer to those first early Indians as the Jindupids, which they say were just peaceful farmers that were living in the Arizona area. They're cannibalizing them. They're grabbing them and snatching them up like they're little chocolate bars or whatever, biting their heads off, throwing their bodies all about. And the early Indians, they run into the crevices of the mountains. They start crying out to that first god, that benevolent creator that they were aware of. They call him the sun god, and he sends a flood, a universal flood that covers over all the face of the earth, that wipes out all of the giants. And then after that, they live in peace for a period of time, and then all of a sudden these giants start coming back. Now, they're not in the same number as they were once before, but they start coming back. Now, why is that important? Because the dating of that period of time in which the petroglyphs are being written down by the ancient Anasazi and the ancient Jindupids and Indians across America, at least 1,000 years or more before Jesus Christ, giants, they're cannibalistic, they're wiping out everybody.
I think, excuse me, I think the point that's going to grab everybody is that we're, how do I say this? We've been led to believe so many wrong things about history. I was told by a general, very active, very famous, I will not drop names, but the reason for the Iraqi war, the one that most people were familiar with, obviously, and the Congress was told, that was superficial. The real story is what they were looking for. They were looking for DNA. And when I say DNA, I'm not just talking about, DNA of the entities that, tearing people literally live apart and then eating them. Again, I started the show with saying that classic archaeology, classic, historians just denied cannibalism in the desert Southwest, blah, blah, blah. And now you hear the story about literally men being torn apart, and you're hearing this from Native Americans. By the way, Native Americans know who tells the truth and who doesn't. Just look at the history of the United States government and the way they've treated them.
The Giants of Kandahar.
Yep.
Okay. So
Another military operation.
Another military operation. So if you have an incident like the Giants of Kandahar, actually, Matt, we need to take a break. I'm gonna bring this up with you after the back of this.
Fair enough.
Beyond 3D. Welcome back this week, everyone, to another episode of Beyond 3D, and I'm sitting here with Matt.
Yep. We're here.
And we were just talking about the Giants of Kandahar.
Indeed, Afghanistan.
Now, I knew we were going to talk about this tonight because you brought it up last week.
Yep, I did.
So I was just mentioning about an alleged cave entrance halfway up a cliff face in
Arizona Grand Canyon,
somewhere off the map. And we were talking about armed guards that's posted outside this cave.
Yeah.
Now, let's go back a little bit to the war in Afghanistan. I have a couple of audio clips that I prepared tonight based on your excitement last week to want to bring this up. An elite team was traversing the intricate cavern system of Kandahar, hunting down and searching for the Taliban during the war in Afghanistan, when this elite team allegedly came across a live 15-foot giant. Now, this was a special operations team, and it wiped them all out.
Yep.
It had a pike and started skewering these soldiers on the pike.
Rotisserie.
And swinging the pike around like it weighed nothing. With these alleged soldiers impaled on the pike, screaming, while the rest of their unit were heavily firing upon this giant, and the bullets were bouncing off, like not penetrating the skin whatsoever. What I've got tonight is a clip from one of the soldiers who was there. So what happened was, this giant allegedly wiped out this whole unit. And a secondary unit was called in
to find the first.
Yeah. So the secondary unit turned up. There was nothing but open chest cavities everywhere, skulls, arms, legs, spewed all over the place. And they turned up and went, "What's going on?" And then bang, this giant came back out again. And I'll just play you the clip now. Would you like to hear it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Beyond 3 D.
We would come back to the base, and we started hearing this rumor about a unit that killed what they started calling this really tall person. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Then come to find out that the person that they killed actually was 3 times the size of a man, had extra digits on their hand and digits on their feet, and had red hair, and a special unit had come in and wanted this target.
Beyond 3 D.
We had yet another witness to the giant story. The initial story that was told to us was related verbatim by this man as fact. There was also a dynamic of the story that I want to point out to you, and it's this. A while back, I interviewed Chief Joseph Riverwood. The chief and I spoke about what I have come to call the Nephilim Lands. This artifact was discovered in the backwoods of Michigan by an outdoorsman named Bob Shelley. Bob gave the original lands to the chief. This weighs about 8.5 pounds. It's very heavy, and when you take this and lash it to a pole, it would be very difficult for a 6-foot man to wield. And yet, this is exactly what the shooter saw the giant wielding in Afghanistan. The reason I bring this up is because when I showed this lance to the shooter, he commented that this artifact was similar to what the Giant of Kandahar was wielding. The fact that this giant had 6 fingers and 6 toes, as well as flaming red hair. There was also a stench that was as powerful as a skunk, but according to the shooter, smelled more like a pile of rotting corpses. Giants are alive and well and living in the present day.
You were in Afghanistan in 2002, and you were called into a very remote section of Afghanistan because a patrol had basically gone missing.
Exactly.
Okay, just no one is around for miles. So it's very remote.
Yeah, very remote. So we flew in to about 4 kilometers. We're hiking through the same area where they were supposed to make one of their checkpoints, one of their welcomes. And before we left, there was all kinds of what happened with the ambush. That was even odd because at point of ambush, you call for maybe close air support, something. Okay? There was no calls made, just off the break. So we're coming down a mountainside, and it was a nice path, slow path. As we bent around this corner, you could see this opening of the cave. There's a cave. We're coming around. And then I see there's a lot of rocks, which is another oddity, and then bone matter. Well, I'm not close enough to identify what kind of bones, but I did see something I knew was a piece of our communication before. So instantly, we're thinking ambush, maybe animal, could be anything. And there was enough room in front of this cave, but it had a sheer drop-off. But there was enough room that we actually got into a decent dispersal in case of ambush.
You see something coming out of the cave, and it's moving with a speed and agility that catches you off guard. Everybody.
And he comes out. It was a man at least 12 to 15 feet. This is a monster, red beard, then his hair was long past the shoulder, a scarlet red, and Dan runs at him, starts shooting, broke all of it into the mouth. As it was so
now your training is kicking in.
Oh yeah,
okay.
Muscle memory. While Dan is moving at him, another row of lines laying down fire, and I start firing. He skewers Dave. He's now got him on this pike. They went through it. He's still got him. And he's coming after more. We all just clicked in. I don't know what it was, but I remember we're all like, shoot him in the face, shoot him in the face. And our weapons components were in force. He had 308s. We had Barrett-50s. This is sounding longer than it took. We're talking 30 seconds. And he's taking multiple hits, and it's still moving. He talked about this giant being 1,100 pounds, anywhere from 10 to 15 feet long, and it was killed. It was apparently shot somewhere in a cave in Afghanistan, but before it was shot, it lunged at several of our troops, our soldiers. May have even gorged somebody. It was just a bizarre story, and it just sounds like the Nephilim from the Bible, doesn't it?
That's why we're so fascinated by this. First off, can you imagine actually seeing something like this? A giant this big who's 12 feet to 15 feet tall. Take a good look at your ceiling. It's probably about 8 feet from the floor. Add another 4 feet on top of that to get 12 feet. Add 7 feet and you get a 15-footer. And as you go up, you've got to go out. That's how big this thing was. I can only imagine how the shooter and his battle buddies must have felt, and the fear that flashed through their minds, paralyzing them until their training kicked in and they brought the giant down. But not before the giant had impaled Dan on that very large pipe.
And you have to assume that the giant is not alone, that the giant is not the only being living on this planet. There's got to be a whole school of them somewhere. And, maybe he's got a female mate. Maybe he's got children. Who knows? Unfortunate that he had to attack our soldiers rather than be somewhat peaceful, but I guess that comes with the territory.
Dan was dead. Okay. And why is a good man, probably one of the best men I know, not dead. Before I'd left, they were already starting what they call a 9-line, which is a medevac request. They're sending out a medevac request, then all of a sudden it's not a medevac request. All of a sudden we had a helicopter show up because, like I told you, it was a large precipice and a sheer drop. So the helicopter just came up from the drop. They dropped netting, which is like cargo netting. It's like squares. We were told we had to bundle him up. And we get another bigger helicopter. But it's almost like a Jolly Green Giant used to look back in the day that could get, through this area. Because the mountains, you gotta remember, Chinooks could only go in certain places because they had enough lift. Mm-hmm. And so we got him on there. The thing was too big. We couldn't move it. It smelled worse than a skunk. A corpse that's been around for a while.
Really fell.
Oh, it was like a combination because of the, how do you put that, the persistence of a skunk smell. But once the helicopter came in, dropped its little hook, and off he goes. The communication was sent out. We had a very large, possible human creature. Of course we're upset. That's a given. Okay. We lost a very good guy. But add to that, you're discussing something that even in our after action report, they're saying rewrite it. And we had to rewrite it to it.
How many fingers?
Six toes. And the nails were weird because if you see somebody that ever has, I don't know what it's called, but
like a fungus on
the nails, how they get pointy and they're like gnarly. That's what they look like.
The radio operator checked in and gave the report, and the unit was told to stand by as Central Command was about to dispatch 2 helicopters to them. They were told that the giant would be loaded on one of the choppers, and then they would follow in the other chopper for debriefing. The shooter told us that when the chopper landed, they loaded the giant into a very large cargo net. The first chopper towing a giant left, and then they boarded the second helicopter and followed. When they returned to their base in the Kandahar province in Afghanistan, they were debriefed and told to keep all of this under wraps. They were forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement, which essentially would prohibit them from talking about this to anyone. It is with great reluctance on the shooter's part that he has come forward. He believes that people have the right to know what is going on this planet, that the supernatural is real, and that the startling and unsettling fact that a remnant of a legendary Nephilim are still on the Earth.
Beyond 3 day.
What a nightmare of a situation that would have been.
Indeed. But I think the thing that strikes me is when you first hear this personally is military personnel, they will probably come across stuff like this a lot. They're just not allowed to talk about
They're
it.
allowed to talk about it. And I've got a secondary clip here that has nothing to do with the first clip.
Right.
Totally different soldier. This guy's a pilot.
Right.
It was his job to fly in a plane and to pick up this captured dead giant.
Right.
And truck it out. Sorry, fly it out.
Yeah.
Nobody knows where it went.
Right.
More than likely, like you said earlier, off to the Smithsonian. But this is this pilot's account of what happened. Because when they killed the giant, they then netted it up and chopped it out to the base. And this pilot flew to the base to collect it.
Right.
Okay. Would you like to hear it?
Absolutely.
I'm not going to say. You're not going to say no.
I'm not going to say no. I want to hear the daggone thing.
Let's share this with everybody tonight.
Yeah,
'cause
absolutely.
It's a little bit creepy.
Beyond 3 day.
There you are in the hills of Afghanistan. How many troop members are you with? We had 6 on my crew, and when we say hills of Afghanistan, for us, we did not play any wilderness. We actually went to a base. I guess this thing was transported out of the mountains by the B-47. But I could see that it did have the 6 fingers. I remember taking my foot up and placing it up next to its foot, and it was extremely large. We estimated it at about 12 feet, give or take. What I can tell you is the weight of the thing, basically, it was approximately 1,500 pounds while it was getting on the aircraft. If you take away the pallet weight and all the rigging that we had to hold this thing down, we figured it around 1,100 pounds.
Beyond 3 day.
After my deployments to Afghanistan, something very strange happened to me that is somewhat related to this. I was basically TDY to Kirtland Air Force Base, which is out in Albuquerque. I was out with my JAG at the time, and there was a Navajo Native American sitting basically in the restaurant that we're in. It was also a bar. And this Native American guy, out of nowhere, he was talking to us, very friendly guy. And out of nowhere, he asked me if I knew what a Native American sing was. And no, I didn't at the time. I do now because I looked it up. But he says, I have to sing for you. And he put his hand on me and started a Native American prayer, if you will. And I thought, wow, this is very strange. But it was cool as well. My JAG that I was with actually took out her Apple iPhone and started to film it, and he stopped and said, no, not on film. And she put it away, and he sang the prayer, and here's where it gets very strange. He started talking about, did I know that there were giants out in the Sandia Mountains? And he said, they're out there in the mountains still, and the earth had swallowed them up. And he goes, watch out. He says, someday they're going to come back. They're going to come back. I then took him aside and said, hey, as a matter of fact, I've seen these things. They're real. At least I think I've seen these things. And I basically conveyed to him the story. He just took it in stride and said, yes, they're real. They're absolutely real. And he said something like, if I remember correctly, like the earth had swallowed them up, but soon the earth will spit them back out.
Beyond 3 day.
Well, there you go. 2 separate people.
Yeah.
2 separate people in 2 different units. The same eyewitness account.
Here's the thing, and I know if I have friends in the military that will, you could ask them a direct question, they will look you in the eye and just not lie to you, but not tell you the truth. Because of the commitments they've made, because they are bound by certain laws that they cannot reveal some of the things they have seen, heard, or otherwise. You get a 15-foot behemoth of a red-haired giant, and they down it. They net it up, pack it up, ship it off. It gets into a plane, usually a C-130, and they cart it out of there. The pilot will know where he is supposed to deliver it, but they compartmentalize everything. So he lands, they offload it,
and then it goes off
on
to
another
somewhere else
plane
with somebody else.
with someone else, and they'll move it around. Then you know they're going to
Genetically take samples of it.
samples and everything like that. They then send those samples to all of their allies around the world that are dealing with this kind of stuff with a report that's a compartmentalized thing again. So if you were to ask me, where would you find this giant now, I'd say it's in at least 100,000 different pieces in many different places around the world. In jars and in formaldehyde and bones over here and over there. And
blood work and
all
DNA.
kinds of stuff has been done.
DNA
and
sequencing.
Being that happens, what they will say is there are no giants, because in this case there isn't any, because it's now in 100,000 different pieces. So this is the kind of thing that they do. But the original story, what happened, like you guys just imagine it if you just went into a cave-like area and all of a sudden you look up.
You're hunting for the Taliban.
Yeah.
You come
And you
across,
come across something like
giant.
this with a pike, angry at you. You know, what are you going to do besides faint and need a change of underwear? It's very, very difficult to deal with, but you can't say anything. And who would believe you?
Well, that's something you'd share. You'd share that with your platoon or your unit.
But then they just tell the unit, none of you, what did you guys see?
Nothing.
And nothing, sir.
Nothing.
And that's it. Plain and simple. And you never have seen anything.
I saw nothing, but it was red.
Yes, and if you mention it, you will have a lot of problems. So you have to be very careful. And so I can commiserate with anybody in the military that has to deal with that, because it's a burden. And what that burden does to you is it puts stress on your entire system. Because now what you have to do is you have to go home.
Belief system.
Yeah,
Yep.
because now all of a sudden you know that your entire history is basically a lie.
What isn't a lie?
The other thing, and it's been proven to you, so it's no longer a belief, it is fact. It is not faith. It is reality for you now. You now go home, and if you have a family, your family still believes the lie. You no longer do.
No, you can't.
That puts stress on your body physically. It puts stress on your mind and soul mentally. It totally wrecks you.
Because you're living one reality,
And they're living
and your
another.
loved ones are living a totally different reality, and you've got your foot in both ponds.
And everything in your being wants to let them know. But you can't. Big time stress.
Well, how do you sit down with your child and say, Daddy killed a giant last week?
And they would go, wow. And you think about it. But then again, in the Bible, you have David and Goliath.
Well, that's what, when I said earlier, this goes back to being biblical.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And same situation. So what it comes down to is, I think, when it comes to this planet, like every other planet in this solar system, a lot of different things have been going on, and they just want to run the narrative that they're running now and not rock the boat, so to speak.
Or, I was going to say, or drip feed you the smallest part.
Yeah, but they're not really drip feeding enough as far as I'm concerned.
I'm not talking about giants. I'm just talking about
everything in general. It just drives me up the wall when they do that kind of stuff. But yeah, from a military standpoint, that would cause a lot of stress, which is why sometimes you get a few of these guys, they do the usual deathbed confessions. When in my opinion, when it's too late. I am a firm believer in the fact that people can handle a heck of a lot more than the government gives them credit for, than any government would give them credit for. So I love the investigatory aspect of stories like this. I love being able to talk to people, even if it's off the record, just so they can verify certain data. And allow you to know that, yes, you are on the right track.
You could present somebody with all that information. I mean, there'd be people tonight that listen to those interviews and those witness statements and eyewitness accounts.
Right.
They would hear that and go, no way.
Yeah, well, that's because...
It smashes with their concept of what their narrative reality is.
To be perfectly honest with you, if the daggone giant appeared in front of you in full form and then just ran off, they would still say no way.
Well, you listen to that eyewitness account, and you hear that soldier turn around and say, "We were all in shock," and then muscle memory training kicked in,
right?
And they all pulled up their socks and did what it was that what they're trained to do, and they collectively brought it down.
Right.
But
hey, look, this is the thing. I mean, there would be a shock factor because you're looking at something that should not exist. Any stretch of the imagination.
You know what I'm thinking of right now?
Go for it.
You know that scene in Jurassic Park where the Jeep pulls up on the hilltop and Sam Neill slowly stands up in the back of the Jeep and he's looking across at something and you don't quite know what it is and the camera pulls back and it's a giant Brachiosaurus. There's
that moment of hesitation.
That moment of trying to process what you're looking at.
Yeah. And then so when you have something like this, but your muscle memory does need to kick in because if you process for more than 10 seconds, you're dead in 11.
Well, it wiped out a whole unit.
That's the whole point. And so it's very fascinating. But as far as I am concerned, that is the tip of the iceberg. Governments around the world know about these creatures. They know about the different civilizations that were just here. This is an ancient story as far as the so-called American Indians are concerned. That they were warring with these giants for a couple of hundred years minimum.
Millennium.
And, it's just, it goes on and on and on.
But see, Native American Indians don't have written history. Their history is passed down through stories.
It's oral, yeah.
It's oral.
So that's the whole thing. But the chiefs and the different members of the tribe know what was going on.
Native American Indians have pretty much been bred out and died off, haven't they? So there's so much knowledge over time will be lost.
Yeah. Well, the Mayans did it to themselves. The American Indians didn't do it to themselves, but stuff
like giants. Yeah. When you say American government would know about that stuff,
yes, they would.
Over time, when you've got a Native American Indian population that's dying off, and their history is passed down through story, eventually all that information is lost, and the government punches the air.
Because they've achieved the goal they wanted to achieve in the first place.
Of silence.
Yeah, but ultimately I'm a firm believer in that the truth will out, and ultimately that is exactly what, in my opinion, will happen. This information is out there. The government, what they're doing now, they're doing it this way. They are no longer poo-pooing or denying when somebody says they found domes on the moon or they found giant skeletons. They just say nothing. They let the stories come out there, and they know it's there, but the fact of the matter is the Smithsonian, as we said earlier, in and of itself, and it's fascinating because they're about to open the new African American Museum on the Mall in Washington for the Smithsonian. They put out the information that they believe the public can handle. Anything that would make people think, truly think, anything that could awaken something within people, that's the information they need to monitor.
It's better to keep your mouth shut and appear like you're lying than open your mouth and remove all doubt.
Yeah. But quite frankly, with the giants, it's not just Kandahar, it's not just mounds in Wisconsin and Ohio, it's worldwide.
Or the Grand Canyon.
It's worldwide.
Worldwide.
They're everywhere, and it's just that ancient, older, but not as prevalent as they were in the past.
Well, there's that whole hollow earth theory as well. When they say that this giant was found in a cavern, and they were talking about it could have been a cavern that went deep down into the bowels of the earth. Who knows?
As soon as you said that, I immediately went to Lord of the Rings and the Balrog.
Yeah, well, who wants to go up against something like that?
Not me. You got something that can make goblins run? You got me going. But that's the whole thing. And then when you start talking about underground, you have to go down to the Antarctic. You have to start talking about Thule Society.
Antarctica or Antarctica?
The Antarctic.
Okay.
As in Antarctica as well. So McMurdo Base down there, and the different maps that they found that showed the coastline of Antarctica, but it's about 500 or 600 years old. And quite detailed in the information that was there, and supposedly they didn't have the cartography skills to be able to do something like that back then. The Thule Society, the different German I forget the names they called it, the Nazis going down there in the different caverns. And the fact of the matter is, if you do a lot of research, you'll find that there are a lot of people out there that believe that the so-called Alpha Draconi basically have manned, for lack of a better term, cities underneath.
Underneath, yeah.
So there's a lot of that going on as well. So it's fascinating. But the giants, Nephilim, and you tie that into the Anunnaki, and you tie that into all those things, you just go, wow. Fascinating stuff.
Especially when you think about the fact that you have a government that removes and takes away a giant like that to be chopped up.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the story gets interesting there, because what the possibilities are that they can do with that kind of DNA and the ways that they can tinker it and tweak it.
What is it called? Cloning.
Can you imagine being a foreign country?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to throw this out because this is pretty wild.
Yeah,
Can you imagine being a foreign country going up against an army of genetically modified giants?
Wouldn't be fun. Wouldn't be fun at all.
Cannibalistic, genetically modified giants.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
The Uruk-hai.
No, thank you.
Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys.
Oh, I'm going to play that. Here we go.
Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys.
Beyond 333D.
Welcome back, guys, to this week's edition of Beyond 3D. Matt and Clint still here with you, hanging in there. Hopefully you've enjoyed the show this week. A couple of other things, and one of them is what's going on around our sun. And once again, guys that are up there constantly watching the skies and watching the planets have caught a really great image in infrared of what looks like a tripod kind of alien craft in and around the corona of the sun. It could be one of those kind of ships that could be draining energy, like pulling up to a gas station, loading up, and then taking off. But it's a fascinating video and a fascinating picture. So you might want to, what we'll do is we'll put a link up on Facebook so that way you can take a look at it. And if you can, what you do, as Chris says in his Mars Anomaly videos, if you have a magnifying glass, take that and enlarge the image that way through a magnifier instead of trying to blow it up quite large on the screen, because what starts to happen, Clint, you know, this gets a little bit of pixelated and everything like that. So
it does.
So you have to be careful. So you're better off getting a magnifier and holding that up to the screen and looking at it that way. But it's fascinating because when you look at this image of the sun and you look in the upper left quadrant at about 10 o'clock, you will see, as you zoom into it or magnify it, you will see what looks like a ship that is shaped almost like a tripod, literally flying in towards the sun for whatever purpose it's doing that. We don't know. We can speculate, but take a look at the image because it's quite fascinating to look at. And what you will find, and I'll put the link up for the website that actually has these pictures up of the sun and with the different filters, because you will find when you look at a lot of the shots, there are a lot of different UAPs, for lack of a better term, different shapes that are flying into and around the sun. Some of them actually look like they're draining energy from it and then detaching and moving on. I have my own theory about this, Clint.
I'm listening.
And quite frankly, we always tend to think of it as UAPs or ships. But from the spiritual texts, as you read them, you will find that they say you are a universe within. There's a universe within you. It's not without you. So if that is the case, in us, there are a lot of different biological organisms that are floating around and doing their own thing. So we are a universe insofar as there are other organisms that live within us as we live on this planet.
Contemplate the fact that there could be an organism out there in the far reaches of space that doesn't need a ship to move around.
Well, this is what I look at when I look at this.
Like a giant whale, like a giant blue whale.
We look in the ocean, and there are fish in the ocean that move around and can operate in that medium of exchange, for lack of a better term.
They don't need oxygen, do they?
Per se. Some of them, if they're mammals, they come up and take air, but some of them under there, like the different giant squid and things like that, can stay under forever and a day. And so a lot of these things that you see in space, they might not necessarily be ships. They might be living entities, and that is where they live.
Traversing space.
Traversing space and doing things along those lines. They do not in any way, shape, or form have to be from a civilization that put it there. And so when I look and see things like this, and some of the things I've seen around the ISS, the International Space Station, and the way they move and the things that they can do, a lot of them look like the old amoebas and parameciums and all the different biological entities that can just be, and that is their
anything you can find in a petri dish with a microscope.
Absolutely. So when I look at that and I see images like this that look like it looks like a tripod, but it looks like it could be a ship that was built, but it also could be a living, breathing, so to speak, being. And where it lives is around our sun in space and what have you.
Well, it is 91. No, 93. It's 93 million miles away. So anything that's happening there could be interpreted anyway from here.
So it's a fascinating thing. But when you look at these things, and especially when you start looking at things out in space and ships, this is why I think Dr. Stephen Greer stated that usually if it's triangles or if it's a certain kind of formation, it's man-made. When you start to see the things that are different humanoids from different spheres and things like that, it's usually energy, it's usually light, and they can travel and they have learned to move beyond the physical form. They can take physical form or they can be energetic.
They've learnt to exist beyond 3D.
Yes, they have.
Thank you, Matt. And that's all we've got time for this week.
That's all you need. That's literally all you need.
That's all we need.
Guys, you take great care. We'll catch you next week with another edition of Beyond 3D.
Good night. Just because you haven't experienced it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.